I heard you just say the word inconsistent, and that was something that you shared. Like you had these ups and downs and your faith was inconsistent. But tell me if I'm putting words in your mouth. But what I think I'm hearing you say is once you use the relationship as the motivation and not just the to-do list as the motivation, it changed the fabric of it to make it more doable, more desirable, and more results producing in your life. Is that true?
Yeah. Because I started praying. I was like, I would pray to like want to do these things instead of it being like a chore, something that I have to do. Because I was thinking kind of back to what Rachel was saying, like the rules and having to follow the rules. And I didn't want it to be that way.
Yeah.
And
That I don't think you can sustain that.
No.
If I'm being honest. Like we are people who are independent and have free will, and there's going to come a time where you just are like, I don't want to.
Yeah.
If it's just something that someone else told you you had to do. I just don't think it's sustainable. No. Yeah, the root of what's causing you to do it matters. And I love the word chore that she said, because I think a lot of people, whether they're raised in the faith and told like have your quiet time every day, or whether they just came into the faith and are told have your time in the Bible every day, it feels prescriptive and not like you just nailed it earlier. You like, remember why we're doing this. Like it's about Jesus. It's not about a to-do list. It's about the relationship. And I shared, one of my really good friends was having a hard time a few years ago. And I said, I can't really describe for you, but I'll try. You know how like when you haven't seen somebody in a long time, you might feel this way being away at college and then coming back. And you haven't seen somebody in a really long time that you just love spending time with. Like, let's say you're going to see him tomorrow. The way you feel today, you're like, I cannot wait. And that's how I feel about reading the Bible and spending time with the Lord. Like, I'm just like so excited because I know what I'm going to experience and it's going to be great. And like, we're going to, I just, that fill me up relationship. I anticipate it when I'm going to sit down and read the Bible or learn more or, study the Lord. That's how I feel about it. And I don't know, there's just something there that's relational, it's truly relational. Like the way I feel about spending time with the Lord is the same way I feel about spending time with you guys. I'm like so excited. I'm going to see my people and we're going to spend time together. And like, you know what I'm talking about? That feeling of like, I can't wait to see her. I miss her. And that's so different than the chore of don't forget to do this, that, and the other, and what motivates us. And that's kind of hard to articulate because if someone's not a believer, it's like, it's almost doesn't seem real. Like how can that be? And that's, some people call it like lifestyle evangelism, but just like living your life that way and living in a way that is proof that you're experiencing that, I think can give other people reasons that they would believe that it's true.
Yeah. I think if you, the only way that you can even hold the attention of an unbeliever is if you have a relationship and you have to talk to them from your relationship.
Yeah, you're right.
And remind them, I'm a sinner just like you. But I know something. I know somebody. And, I'd love to introduce you to them.
The authenticity of a real relationship versus...
It makes it easier to talk to them, doesn't it? It's like talking to, I got a friend named Molly. Yeah, I got to meet her. It's like that.
Yeah.
So at least that's what I have found.
Yeah. That's good. Yeah. So there's so many nuggets in what you've already said. Let me let you finish your notes. I love that you have notes.
She's got a lot of notes.
I love it.
She's making me look
And she's
bad.
holding out some for the next time. She's super ready.
So, oh boy, I don't know where I left off.
Sorry, that's my fault for interrupting you.
No, you're good. So I think what I was coming to is kind of like the end of it here. Then I think the next thing was I had another struggle. It didn't really like alter my faith really. I mean, it strengthened it. Was, I don't know if this was like summer of 2020, but like with everything with like the Black Lives Matter and all that. What did we say in your hullabaloo?
The hullabaloo of 2020.
It was a whole year, honestly, was like a really big like self-growth time for me. But I think especially as like a young Black woman in America during that time, that was like, especially as a Christian too, because then a lot of people started coming for Christians because some of them were not really, I don't know how to explain it, in like the nicest way possible, were not understanding, a lot of non-Black Christians were not understanding what was going on. And a lot of them were focusing on like the negatives of like people rioting, which is like not what we're supposed to be doing, but like, you know what I mean? It's hard to understand when you're not, when these aren't your experiences. So I think that was big for me, was just kind of examining the faith and realizing like Jesus, you know, fights for those that are oppressed, and remembering that and telling that to people, because and like reminding them like, don't focus on like the things that are happening that are a part of like this Black Lives Matter thing that are like negative, because like obviously we shouldn't be rioting and, you know, destroying stores, but like that shouldn't be the focus of the situation at hand. Like there's a reason why we're rioting, and you should be looking at that instead of, you know, the rioting. And I think that was the biggest thing, was like telling people and talking to people about things like that.
And tying together how God is a God of justice. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So bringing that into play with other Christians, this is like mostly with other Christians, that, you know, God wants us to fight for those that are oppressed. And at the time, like that was Black people. And
Oh, not just at that time.
well, not just at the time, for a very long time. And there were like instances with people that we went to school with that weren't intentionally like mean about it or offensive, but they're like, oh, I've never experienced anything like that. Well, you're white. Like, of course you haven't. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's not, that's not something you're going to experience, but it's something that you need to understand happens. And just because like something doesn't happen to you doesn't mean it's not happening to others. I think that was the biggest thing for me was, and I stopped going to my church for a while, and I'm still kind of looking for a new church. I stopped going to my church for a while because I didn't want to be associated with those people, because I want to help them understand, but at the same time, I was burnt out.
Yeah.
And I was like, it's not that hard.
Yeah.
Just look at the situation.
That was an
Yeah.
exhausting time to be a person of color,
And
because it was so many conversations.
yeah, every 5 seconds, it was like, oh, how do you, like, I don't.
Even the
yeah.
good conversations
Yeah,
where people were
exactly.
like, help me understand your
Yeah.
experience, right? Like that's what we were sort of all trained to do as white folks during that time. Like, okay, find the people of color in your life and listen to their experience. Well, that's exhausting because you're like every 10 minutes telling your experience, and it's not been all good. So to relive it again and again, I know that was like an exhausting time.
So that was like the biggest thing for me, was helping like other Christians understand why Black Christians were doing like things that we're doing. I mean, I don't think any of us were
So you're
rioting,
saying
but-
reconciling the faith with what was happening that summer.
Yeah, because I didn't at that time when I wasn't going to church. I mean, obviously I still had a relationship with God, but that was like a hard thing for me to do, because like I obviously wanted to go to church, but it was like I couldn't like physically be in that environment, and I felt very uncomfortable around white people for, I mean, I still kind of do sometimes, but like obviously not the people that I know, but I didn't want to be in an area with people that didn't look like me. That was not what I wanted to do. And it was kind of like, is this going to do something to my faith? And it didn't. And I mean, honestly strengthened it and made me realize like, you don't have to, you know, stay where you don't have to stay uncomfortable. Like, you know, if I wanted to, like, I'm looking for a church now that where I like feel comfortable, and you know there are people like me and also people my age. That's another thing too.
Can I interrupt you just for a second?
Yeah.
You just said something. You said that it strengthened your faith. Can you explain more? What? Because I see how God takes something unpleasant, and He uses everything, even the unpleasant stuff. So what did you mean by that? Like it strengthened your faith?
So for me, it was like a reminder of like God's love for us and that he fights for everyone and that he loves everyone. And even though like I wasn't really seeing that in the world, I remember that like for myself. And then also because I always thought when I was younger, I was like, if I stop going to church, I'm not going back. And that was when I stopped going. I mean, I was still doing it online. I just wasn't like physically going. It was like affirming to me because I was like, well, I don't really want to be in this church anymore. Let me go find another one.
Yeah.
And that was like the biggest thing for me that strengthened my faith, because it was like, I'm looking for another church. I'm looking to find another place of worship, another place of fellowship, because I was always scared that I was like, if I stop going, like, you know, like I'm not going
It just disappears.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I still had my relationship with God, and it just strengthened my faith and strengthened my relationship because I was like actively looking to find a place where I felt comfortable. And I think that was like really what strengthened my faith, because I was scared that if I stopped doing certain things with my faith, that it would just kind of go away. It would just be like, you know, when I was younger, when I would be like, oh, this is great. And then, you know, I would stop doing the things that, you know, are important.
So what you're saying, maybe if I can reflect back to you, what I'm hearing is that the Holy Spirit sustained you and sustained your faith. And that was a strengthening, because you're like, oh, it's more than just up to me to keep this going. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. The other thing that I heard, which is true for me too, and I think true for anybody, is that the environment in the U.S. at that time exerted itself on her life in a way that she was caused to talk more about a God of justice and her faith. And anytime you're forced to articulate what you believe and examine what you believe, that can strengthen your faith. Because without those influences, sometimes we just sail along. And it's that sort of cruise control faith, which is fine. But sometimes when something like your experience of that moment in your life that was an upheaval, this is an experience of an upheaval. And so when we experience that and the Lord helps us to articulate it, and when we seek him, we find him, like that strengthens. Yeah. But being forced to explain it again and again, you're going to refine what you're saying the next time. You're like, wait, I think I could say that better next time. I think I can. And like I said, I know it was exhausting, but I could also see where it got you to a place where now you're really good at being able to say that bit because you examined it, articulated it, had it questioned, had to defend it. That strengthens your argument, I guess, so to speak, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that right, what I'm saying?
Yeah. Just like, you know, saying it over and over again, even though it was exhausting, was like, you know, when you start to say something over and over again, you're like, oh, wait. And then you think about it. And just kind of like, you know, I made like the joke, but not really a joke, that like Jesus would be at the protest. He wouldn't be rioting, but he would be there. And I think that ruffled feathers, but I believe it to be true. So, and that was what kept me. That's a big thing with like my non-believer friends. They were like, oh, like look at all these Christians and all the stuff that they're saying about like Black Lives Matter, like, and not looking at like the cause, but looking at like the negative things of it, and like just telling my friends like that's not what God would have wanted us to do, and showing them like what I believe and what is true, that like he would be right there with us.
Yeah.
And I think that was a big thing for them to like see that from someone, you know, from my relationship with him. And
also a big thing for you to realize that.
Yeah.
The God that I serve would stand next to me in this moment, is standing next to me in this moment. Yeah.
So I think that was a big thing, especially for them, because we're seeing a lot of Christians kind of not looking at the right part of this situation.
Yeah.
So to hear like from me, even if it's just one person, you know, I mean, there's also other people at my school that are Christians that they were friends with that were saying like the same things. And I think that helped them realize that it's not like Christians aren't all like that.
We're not all Westboro Baptist.
Yeah.
God. There's like, by the way, do you know there's like 38 people in that whole congregation?
I thought there was like,
They just make so much noise that they seem bigger. And it's just so frustrating. Okay, if you don't know Westboro Baptist, those are the people that the press loves because they're always yelling at and demeaning and disparaging anybody who basically walks in front of them while they're holding up their signs. And I found that out a few years ago. It's like, wow, small. But it actually, if you flip the script, it gives you hope because it shows you that a small number of voices can make a big impact.
How about it?
Yeah. So that's good.
and now moving on to my last thing. I had a lot here.
Oh,
She did her
a lot
homework.
of homework.
I love
I
it.
should have brought a sandwich.
Get some Uber Eats real quick.
That's great.
Great lesson, everyone. So then my biggest thing, I work for those of you that don't know, I work for Study with Friends. I do like the social media stuff. So I was doing, one of the things we post like apologetics every once in a while. And I was looking through, I was like, I need to find more verses to post. And then also I would like read them and like save some of them. But this one I saved and like I have it saved in my phone. And like this has like been a huge thing. And it's Philippians 4:11, and it says, "Not that I speak in regard to need, for I have learned in whatever state I am to be content." Yeah. And it's just like no matter what's going on in my life, I know that God's got me, so I'm content. And even if it's like I'm going through a tough time, I just like remember this verse. Or I remember that like God's, He's got my back. So
yeah, I have a similar verse that has really stuck with me is Romans 8:28 when it says like God works for the good of those who love him. And it's like the same thing, like when you're going through tough times, like you can look back on, that's a very similar verse. Like God is working for your good. He's going to use it. He's there for your comfort. Like he's not fighting against you. He's fighting with you, like, and he's going to use anything that you go through.
exactly.
Good segue.
Yeah.
Your turn, babe.
So
That was really good, Kate. Thank you.
that was really good. Thank you for sharing. I don't have quite as in-depth notes. I just kind of have some things that I wanted to cover. But yeah, one of the greatest things in my faith and one of the greatest privileges that I've had is being able to see and learn from other people's mistakes. And I think and how God used those mistakes and how, just being able to like witness that. Growing up in like a really bad neighborhood, like my parents, my dad is a pastor and we're just in one of like the most crime-ridden areas of the city. And most of our congregants, if not all, have been through some crazy things. Like I'm talking prostitutes, drug addicts, criminals, people who have been in jail for years. And one thing that I can look back to every time that I'm like, oh man, like, is God like really here in this moment is like seeing how faithful he was in their lives. And just like, I think that's something that is so mind blowing to me is the faithfulness of God. Like through all these years, like these people have gone through so many things and like he's still so faithful in their lives and he's still so transforming to them. Because like out of all of the things that they did, like he came and like changed their lives around and now
Redeemed it.
Yeah, he redeemed them and like seeing who they are now and knowing what they did in the past like is just so impactful for me because I just know how they couldn't do that without Jesus. Like there's just absolutely no way that someone who like literally people who have like murdered other people like how transforming they are, how transformed they are because of Jesus like is just insane to me. And it couldn't happen without God.
Can I do an interesting juxtaposition? Mm-hmm. She was saying how people came to her school and told stories like that. Mm-hmm. And she was like, I couldn't really relate. Well, the reason I want to point that out is that you both gave examples of similar things like that. And for one person, it was super impactful. For another person, it was just not something that she could relate to. Excuse me. I find that so interesting because it opens up the idea that we haven't really unpacked yet, which is each of our experiences are highly personal, highly customized to us, for God to win and redeem and restore us in very personal ways. So I just think that had to be mentioned because she's saying a lot of the things that you were like, yeah, people would come to our school and be like, okay, this is my life and this is what God did with it. And you were just kind of like, okay, you know, which I get because you're like, that's so far away from me. How can I even relate to that? But you had a completely different experience with it, which I just love that because it just goes to show that each of us needs something different and God meets us where we are.
And I think there is a difference because when you're just hearing it from someone, like it goes in one ear out the other versus like I literally like would see them, like I would see people like overdose and stuff like that. And like being in the trenches with them and like literally seeing that is so different than just hearing it from
the
someone.
story.
They're just speaking
That's
at
a great
you, but like
point.
actually living with them and living through their heartbreak, like seeing women whose husbands are leaving because they're just so addicted to drugs and the kids are all, you know, they don't have a father in their lives or even just like anger issues, stuff like that. People who have been like healed from that. And I see like how far they've come and like, I think seeing it and living with it and being in relationship with those people is a lot more impactful for me than, because I heard those things too. Like we went to the same high school and stuff and I like they would come in and speak and I'd be like, okay, like the same thing. Like what am I going to do with that? But like, I don't know, seeing from their mistakes and also seeing people who chose not to follow God and who chose to go a different direction and seeing how their lives turned out versus how the people who really chose to follow God with their whole lives and like, even through the consequences, because there are still consequences like to the sin, because there's earthly consequences and stuff, but seeing how even through that God is faithful and even through that God forgives them and redeems them and makes them a whole different person. So yeah, living through that was definitely different for me than just hearing it as well.
Hi, I'm Holly, and I'm the primary teacher and author here at Study with Friends. My education is from a Reformed theological seminary, so you'll see that come through as we teach and study together. But on occasion, I'll introduce concepts from other doctrines when I think they shed light on the material, just so that we can have a well-rounded understanding of lots of different perspectives on the text. We strongly believe that you should know and understand who's teaching you the Bible. And so you can learn more about me at studywithfriends.org or zondervan.com. We're just really glad you're here.